Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. This is your Thursday AMA. Let me go ahead and grab the link here, post it so that everyone can join, and we will go through several different questions. Of course, I've already fielded questions in the Telegram chat room, so feel free to post them there if you have any. I try to remember to do the ones on YouTube or try to get through some of them, but oftentimes I forget to go to YouTube and look. But yeah, so I mean, pretty interesting time in the market. Bitcoin 28K still, but the dominance continues to sort of slowly go higher. I still am in the camp, of course, that it will break out. It remains to be seen if we're going to have another, consolidation phase or not. But let me get through as many of the questions as I can. Do I think the UK will fall into a recession? Yeah, I do think they will. I would say that they're more likely to than the United States. Although I think the United States will as well. I would say that Europe will likely. It'll be even more difficult in Europe than it is here in the United States. Can I please take a look at some real estate indicators and give us your opinion? My general opinion about the housing market is that it's a very slow moving process. I think that the housing market is in a bear market, but I'm also sort of in the camp that it's not likely to find a true bottom for 2 or 3 years. Okay, so that's my general assessment. Again, I'm not a real estate expert, so I don't really want to pretend to be. I just think that the main issue right now in the real estate market is that interest rates have gone up a lot, which makes a lot of the homes more unaffordable. And I think homes are about, even more unaffordable today than they were back at the peak of the real estate bubble back in 2008, 2009. But even though interest rates are high and mortgage applications are at extremely low levels, you just don't really have a lot of supply coming onto the market. And so until we see either increased demand or increased supply, it kind of seems like the market will just continue to slowly bleed, is my general expectation. So I would expect, the latter half of this year, I think house prices will continue to fall. Where I think things become somewhat unclear is, there are certain things that would make housing inventory go up, and that could be things like a recession, right? Layoffs, where people just simply can't afford their home payment anymore, their mortgage anymore, even if they would like to keep their mortgage rate. If they just can't afford it, they can't afford it. So I do think prices are likely going to continue to go down. You might see short-term renewed interest whenever the Fed pivots, but I do think there's a case to be made that the real estate market is just likely in like a longer several year decline that could last a few years. I'm sort of suspecting it could last out until 2025, 2026. That doesn't mean it's just going to be down the whole time. You could have, periods where it goes back up a bit, but my general take on the real estate market is that it's just a bear market. But it's very slow. Like I wouldn't expect a crash like 30, 40%. It might just drop, a few percent, right? Like it might only drop 5% this year. It might not be what a lot of people I think are hoping for in terms of like a sort of like a windfall type crash where everything just drops 30, 40%. It might just be like a very, very slow and painful decline. Any more thoughts about bringing people onto the channel? Yeah, I continue to think about it. I know a lot of people are kind of against it, so I've sort of put that idea on hold for the moment, but I might revisit it in a little bit. At least in the poll, it seemed like most people were against it. Thoughts about Operation Choke Point 2.0. So I think there is some truth to the idea that, the U.S. government is trying to remove liquidity from the cryptoverse. It is unfortunate. I know it's not being reflected, of course, right, in the market right now, but it's going to be more difficult for future money to get into the market if all these on-ramps or a lot of the on-ramps are being shut off. Now, there are some newer on-ramps, right? But yeah, I mean, certainly we're fighting a pretty difficult battle right now. I think we're, and then they fight you phase. Okay. I don't think we're yet at the and then you win phase. I just think we're in the and then they fight you phase right now. Can I please talk about precious metals? I don't have much more to say other than what I've already said. I mean, my general expectation with things like gold and silver are that they are likely going to continue to go higher over the next 5 years off and on. I don't talk about them a whole lot just because it takes a long time for really anything to happen. So like, the price of gold today is 1982 and 6 months from now, it could still be around $2,000. I mean, it was actually around this price, 9 or a year ago, or we were also around this price. So I am actually quite bullish on precious metals, especially things like gold, silver, uranium, etc. But I also understand that a lot of people that are in this group are not necessarily going to be the most enthused about the rate at which precious metals go up. I do think it's a good thing to have in your portfolio just to make sure you're diversified into that category, because we have seen periods where they go on pretty substantial bull runs. So that is just, of course, something to consider. What about REITs? Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of REITs, to be completely honest. The reason is because if you're in the real estate market, I think more of the money is actually made if you're actually the one, not just buying some type of fund. Because if you buy the fund, then it's sort of the people that manage that fund that take a majority of the money. And additionally, REITs, as a function of time, often underperform the S&P 500. So yes, REITs can go higher as a function of time, especially because you assume the real estate market will eventually go back up. But they also tend to underperform the S&P 500. So I do think real estate is a good asset class to be in. But I think if you're going to be in it, I'm not really sure that REITs are the way to go, just simply because it's likely going to continue underperforming just the S&P 500. How do you feel about Amazon stock? Yeah, I was actually looking at Amazon stock. It's sort of retraced a lot of its 2021 move, has it not? Like if you go take a look at sort of this move here, or 2020 move, it sort of retraced all of it. I'm sort of still in the camp that it's not going to highs anytime soon. I think that it's likely going to chop around in this area. If it comes back down here to sort of like its December 2018 low, like some things have, that could be a good opportunity. It sort of reminds me of Meta. Like if you look to see where Meta went, I mean, this was the sort of the 2018 low. Meta went well below that level. So, I think some of these stocks, while I'm not saying they don't have some value at the current levels, I think there is a case to be made that they could easily continue lower before really getting into another bull market. I don't have any thoughts about the PayPal stock. At what ETH Bitcoin valuation would I convert Bitcoin back to Ethereum? Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't really consider it until at least like 0.04 probably. I mean, I would say that maybe other people should consider it before then, because I don't really want to get into the same mess as last time after the merge, or sorry, leading into the merge. So yeah, I mean, I think in that sense, sorry, I just realized my video is not on here. So I think in that sense, I'm not saying that other people should necessarily wait, but for me, I'm more so interested in it getting back down to that 0.03, 0.04 range. You seem too sure about a lower low. What percentage of probability? Yeah, so I've been pretty clear. I'm not too sure about a lower low. I've said about 60-40. So I'd say 60% chance you see a lower low, 40% chance you don't, at least with Bitcoin. With altcoins, I think most of them are going to see lower lows. So with the altcoin market, I would say my conviction is like 80% chance that you're probably going to see lower lows on most of them. But some altcoins have probably already bottomed. It's just that I feel like most of them probably haven't. With Bitcoin, I would say it's about 40-60. So 40% chance it has, 60% chance it hasn't. That's not a new probability. That's exactly what I said back in November, December timeframe. I said, about a 40% chance that it's bottomed. And the main reason I wasn't willing to go 50-50 or higher was just simply because I do still think we're staring down the face of a recession. Even though I don't think it's here yet, I think one is coming. And because of that, it's hard to get too optimistic about it, about, there not being another low. So I would say about 40-60. If we come back down and then like double bottom, or put in a slightly higher low, let's say we go back to like 17-18K, and then we start to trend back up, then maybe I would be a lot more confident. But I mean, at this phase, I don't really think there's any reason to be overly confident that we're not going to eventually revisit those levels. I mean, we typically do. Obviously, history does not necessarily repeat in the exact same way, but a lot of elements of the cycles have continued to repeat, and I think that that you could easily see that occur once again. Is the halving narrative important? I do think it's important. I mean, I think it's somewhat coincidental that it happens to sort of correspond to typical periods of quantitative easing, but I do think it's important, and we should see Bitcoin continuing to do well next year as well. I do think there's going to be one more scare in the cryptoverse, and I think it'll probably sort of hit its crescendo in the latter half of this year. Am I bored yet? Yeah, I mean, like, I think there is some element of like apathy is setting in for a lot of people. I mean, like, it's weird. It's weird to see price going up like a lot and the social statistics going down. So it really does show you that while price has gone up, most people don't really care that much. And one element of that could be that, yeah, Bitcoin has gone up a lot, but the altcoin market really hasn't. I mean, a lot of alts have not really gone up. I mean, like, even, yes, Bitcoin has hit a new local high at 29K, but if you look at a lot of the altcoin market, they haven't really gone anywhere. Like, look at Polkadot. I mean, it's still at $6, right? Like, I mean, it was at $6 back in September of 2022. Like, half a year ago, it was at the same valuation. So I do think people are starting to throw in the towel, and you really are seeing that with the deterioration of these alt Bitcoin pairs. I mean, they continue to go down on more or less a daily basis. And I think the altcoin market is more of a reflection of the social sentiment than anything. So, I mean, if social interest continues to go down, then the things that get hit the hardest is the altcoin market, right, over Bitcoin. I also think the altcoin market is helping to prop up Bitcoin at higher valuations, and we've seen this happen before. We saw it happen in 2018 as well, even in 2019, the rally. But the issue is that at some point, altcoins get so devalued on their Bitcoin pairs that the purchasing power of those altcoins with respect to Bitcoin is just so little that then even the liquidity flow from the altcoin market back to Bitcoin is not enough to keep Bitcoin USD elevated. And so that's when you get Bitcoin USD coming back down, and you get the altcoin market bleeding even quicker. So, I still, I mean, I know it's hard because, like, I know everyone wants me to say something different, but it's really hard for me to get on the bandwagon, on the altcoin bandwagon, when I still see them just bleeding against Bitcoin for the next several months. What will be your inflection point to get into alts? How does capitulation on the Bitcoin pair look like? Yeah, so I'd like to see a lot of them get devalued on their Bitcoin pair while Bitcoin does not put in a new low. I'm not saying that Bitcoin can't put in a new low, but what I'd like to see is I'd like to see altcoins put in new lows on their Bitcoin pairs while Bitcoin has not yet put in a new low. And then if Bitcoin does get one final capitulation, whether it's a lower low or a double bottom or something like that later this year, something like that, then I think the altcoin market makes sense. But I still think a lot of them are so overvalued on their Bitcoin pairs. And I know a lot of people think that that's not true, but one thing to think about, and I don't know, I mean, like, what I'm about to say doesn't necessarily reflect the level of bearishness that I am on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. I'm not really convinced that it has to come back down to 0.1, but the Ethereum Bitcoin market cap, is sort of at that 0.4. It's at 0.4. But we've also seen it at 0.4 before as well, and then it eventually made it down to 0.1. So how does it get to 0.1, right? I mean, like, that would just be insane for a lot of people to consider that as a possibility. Well, first note that this part of the move was basically when Bitcoin USD bottomed, right? It was right around here. So there could be some element of, like, the Ethereum Bitcoin market cap valuation sort of goes down halfway, and that could sort of mark the turning point of everything of the altcoin market on their USD pairs, right? So if Ethereum Bitcoin comes down here, that could actually mark the turning point. But it could still go down if, say, in 2024, Bitcoin rallies, right? I mean, like this area right here in 2019, Bitcoin was rallying. So I don't know if I'm that bearish on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. I mean, I'm bearish to the point where I think it's going to come back here. I don't know, like sort of this is a question mark for me if it's actually going to make this plunge as well, because from a time-based perspective, I'm not really sure we have enough time to see it go down that low without the hype sort of returning to Ethereum. But I do certainly think that it's likely going to come back down, basically a 50% haircut at least from where it currently is. So that's my general expectation. Of all the indicators, where do you rank social risk? I mean, I would say the risk metrics in general are the most important things. I mean, the social risk is still something we're sort of experimenting with. We created it after the sort of the 2021 secondary top, and I'd be interested to see, if how it performs. I mean, we need to know. We need to see if the altcoin reckoning continues, and if altcoins go put at new lows on their USD pairs while the social metric deteriorates, then I think it's a pretty good indicator that we should use. Thoughts on NVIDIA? Yeah, NVIDIA is tough because, I put out a message not too long ago saying I thought that NVIDIA had sort of reached its top. We still haven't taken out that price that I said that at. So basically, I believe it was on Wednesday, March 23rd or something. I said I think NVIDIA has hit its peak. So right here, we are, of course, testing that. So it's not like it would take that much more to send us above that. So this is one of those things like, I have an opinion about it, but it's somewhat loosely held. Of course, if we take it out, then I was wrong. I mean, it's possible that NVIDIA could push a little bit higher, but I do think it's getting really close to the end of its run. I'm still thinking, I mean, this still could be the top on NVIDIA. If it comes back up to this level, that's just a little bit higher, right? Like 289 or so. But I think this move is getting somewhat exhausted, and it should turn around relatively soon. Thoughts on taking profits at a Bitcoin risk level of 0.5? Yeah, I mean, it's all about what how risk averse you want to be. If you go take a look at the dashboard, or if you look at Bitcoin, you'll notice that 0.5 risk is at 29,114. So of course, we hit that. So if you are taking profits on it, I would only say 1/15 of your Bitcoin it would be my general recommendation. Not financial advice, of course, but if you are in the camp of taking profits on it, I would say about 1/15 is probably the right amount. I do think you have to be careful because in general it's a recovery year, so you have to be careful with just how much profits you take because even if we go lower, even if we put in a new low, the real move that I think is more interesting probably won't occur until 2024, 2025 timeframe. And if the move occurs now rather than 2025, then you don't want to just sell all your Bitcoin before it goes up to higher risk levels. So I would say 1/15 is about right. And then if we go up to a higher risk level, it could be 2/15 and so on and so forth. But you're right, we did hit the 0.5 risk level, so it is at least an interesting level to sort of think about if you need to get a little bit cash heavier. That could present an opportunity to sort of get some cash in hand. With that said, again, I don't think you need to be getting too greedy on profit taking because over the long haul, Bitcoin should go much higher than 28K within the next couple of years, even if we put in either double bottom or lower low between now and then. Can we make a DCA tool? I mean, maybe if you tell me exactly what type of DCA tool you're looking for. But yeah, we could potentially do something like that. Do you still think generational opportunities are coming? Yes. I mean, I think 2023 will be remembered as the generational opportunities year in general. We're already seeing that in the financial sector. We saw it on Meta last year. I think we're going to continue to see it throughout this year. So yes, I think a lot of great opportunities are coming this year. What risk level bands do you see as buys and sells for the S&P? Yeah, I mean, I feel like for selling it, it's got to be above, like, I don't know, 0.8 risk, 0.75, 0.8 risk. And then even then, it's only really if you need the money because, I mean, over time, the market's going to trend higher, I think. Um, Certainly these levels I think could merit DCA. I mean, I've said that for a long time that for stocks it's pretty boring, in terms of just DCAing into the market. Um, so uh, I mean, historically I've said, as long as the risk is below zero point 0.7, it's okay to DCA into the market. Um, I sort of got somewhat light on that once we realized that a true bear market was starting back in early 2022. But I mean, over the grand scheme of things, below DCAing in below zero point 0.7 risk does tend to work out over the long haul. Of course, right now the risk level on the S&P 500 is quite a bit lower than 0.7 risk. What is the best Bitcoin alt play for 30x return? I mean, Ethereum is probably going to give you the best risk reward play at some point. I don't think it's here right now, but I think Ethereum will probably give you the best risk reward after Bitcoin. Um, do we have any plans to update the ITC mobile app? Yeah, I mean, we are going to do it, but we don't have any plans of doing it immediately. Thoughts on Plan B? I mean, I don't really have any major thoughts. I'm not really sure what he's saying right now, but um, I think in general he tries to provide a good perspective on the market. What do I think about a potential higher low? Yeah, I mean, like a potential higher low could occur. Um, I think that could happen, but I also think people like we should be aware of a potential like double bottom or lower low. I mean, look, we had a double bottom in 2015. In 2020, it was a higher low. So I think we need to be on the lookout for a potential, any of those three things, right? But that's for Bitcoin. For the altcoin market, I think many will put in lower lows. Could the Bitcoin safe haven narrative take hold and dramatically shift expectations for this cycle? Um, could this time really be different? No, I don't really think so. I mean, this happens every single time. Like we kind of get ahead of ourselves in the pre-halving year. Some narrative takes hold, and then a lot of people call for new all-time highs. And I know that some people are calling for like a shifted cycle top so that it occurs like maybe before the halving or around the halving. I'm not really in that camp. I think that this is a pretty typical phenomenon to see, and I think we will come back down in the back half of this year, or it could even start in Q2. But I think we don't really start trending higher until after the halving. Do you have any concerns about Ethereum's uh, credible neutrality, given the regulated entities on most of its node infrastructure, now its staking infrastructure? Could regulatory capture boost or harm Ethereum's price performance? I do think regulatory risk is much more likely for Ethereum and altcoins than Bitcoin, which is why I'm not really in the altcoin market. While not a full pivot, a lot of money is being printed, which usually leads to risk assets going up. Despite a potential and increasingly likely recession, is the money printer turning on this early and aggressive a reason to revisit the outlook for the next 12 to 18 months? I don't really consider what they've done so far to really be a money printer. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't improve liquidity in the system. It does, but it's not the same type of thing that I think people think of when they think of QE. So, yes, in the short term, it's provided some relief to markets, but I don't think that looking at that as the reason that we're about to start, a secular bull market is the best idea. You said alts are probably going to bottom against Bitcoin in Q3. Does that mean you see Bitcoin USD bottoming out in Q2? I don't know. I mean, I again, like it could be a higher low. It could be a double. I don't think a higher low is the most likely outcome, but it could be. I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that you could see Bitcoin bottom around the same time as well, or whatever bottom it's going to be, right? Whether it's a lower low, double bottom, or a higher low, I could see it happening by like the third quarter. How do you determine which alt projects are worthwhile, which are vaporware, as you call it? Um, well, I think to some degree you need to see which ones are actually going to provide some level of utility, and which ones could sort of ride popular narratives. I also looked to the founders and look at who's actually running the project, and that goes a long way in trying to figure out if I'm actually going to invest in it. Thoughts about how low BNB Bitcoin will realistically go. Um, so yeah, so with BNB, um, I wouldn't really be surprised actually to see it potentially even take out this low eventually. Um, but that could be a lot later on. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it do something like this and then maybe come back up and then sort of do something like that. And then, that's sort of what I'm thinking. But I do think you're likely going to see it take out, go below 7 or 8,000 Satoshis eventually. I mean, it's already down like 40, 50% from its high. Is Ethereum coming home? That's the goal. It hasn't yet, that's for sure. If we go take a look at Ether, so Ethereum. So home is now at 808, which is funny because it's not even that much lower than where we already went. Now the lower part of this band is at 559, so which would sort of be like the basement, which we have gone to. Right? I mean, we've spent some time there before as well. Note that the last time we went to the lower half was in 2019 and in 2020, and this occurred in November of 2019 when we went sort of the lower half of it. So, I mean, I think that you could see Ethereum push a little bit higher, but I think it's probably going to come back into this range, consolidate, and then start to move back up again. What do I think about the recent uptick in the U.S. 10-year minus the spread in the 2-year and the 10-year? Um, I think the market's getting a little ahead of itself, honestly. Like, I don't really think it's time for them to uninvert just yet, but I could see it happening in the next 6 months. So you're talking about this most recent move back to the upside and the spread on the 2-year and the 10-year. It is kind of rolling back over again. And also note here in the 80s, we had a few periods where it seemed like it was going to invert, and then it didn't actually, or sorry, we thought it was going to uninvert, or people would have thought it was going to uninvert. I wasn't alive at the time, but it didn't. So I think it's maybe a little bit ahead of itself, because I think probably they thought that, they're probably sort of thinking that the market the Fed's going to pivot because of the recent distress in the banking system, and the Fed raised another 25 basis points and said, well, to hell with it, we're going to keep raising. So I think it's probably a little bit too premature, but an uninversion could take place, within the next year. Could be like 6 months or so. I think the average time from when it inverts to when it uninverts is about 18 months, and this occurred. I mean, the first time it inverted was back in April, which does mean we're coming up on 12 months, and then it actually truly inverted in July. So it still could be, several more months away. Can you go over why TLT may be a good buy again? So TLT is a good buy if you want to basically hedge against the downside risk of the economy. Okay, so if you think the economy is going to sort of go into a disaster mode, and that the Fed will ultimately have to significantly pivot, and rates are going to come back down, or at least if you think the long end of the yield curve is going to come back down, then that's why TLT would be a good buy. Now, history shows that waiting until an actual pivot is not the worst idea, which is why I haven't been getting any yet. But I still think it's not the worst idea to sort of DCA if you want to DCA into it. Doesn't a stock market crash happen when the 3-month and the 10-year uninvert? I feel like people are forgetting it happens after the uninversion, unless I'm not remembering correctly. No, you're remembering exactly correctly, right? I mean, it's in the uninversion that the recession occurs, and the 3-month and the 10-year spread has been getting even lower, right? As recently as just a few days ago. So note that when it uninverts, it can of course occur very quickly. I mean, you can see what happened here in 2000. It reached its lowest point in January 2001, and then we were in a recession by March. I mean, so it literally just took 2 months from when it hit its low. So I don't like I think there's some evidence to say we're not in a recession yet. I mean, we just had, we're seeing that GDP is continuing to come in at relatively high levels and putting in new all-time highs. Unemployment rate is still relatively low. We do get more unemployment data next week, but I don't think we can look at this right now and say we're in a recession. Pause normally leads to local pumps and rate cuts lead to dumps, but wrong expectation on rate increase will lead to local dump. What's going to happen? It's mixed messages. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to understand the question. It's sort of a lot of mental gymnastics to some degree, right? I mean, normally when the Fed cuts, the market sells off. But the reason why the market sells off when the Fed cuts is they're not selling off because the Fed is cutting. The Fed is cutting because the market is selling off, or because the economy is going down the tube. So again, I think a lot of people look at the Fed cut as like, oh, well, that's going to cause a sell-off. No, the Fed usually cuts because the market's starting to sell off. And then by the time the Fed's cutting, the market doesn't really care anymore, because, I mean, a lot of that stuff takes a long time to hit the economy anyways. Just like it takes a long time to feel the tightening effects, it can take a long time to feel the easing effects as well. Would you buy alts if the crypto conditions were right, but the macro still looked bad? Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think if the dominance were at 60%, I'd be a lot more interested. But, how do I go out and buy altcoins if I think that the dominance is going to 60%, which I do? So if I think it's just going to bleed against Bitcoin, I'd rather not buy alts. If I'm going to buy anything, it's going to be Bitcoin. And if I'm going to buy Bitcoin, it's below 0.4 risk, which is not right now. What I consider a small investment at a VIX ETF. Yeah, I mean, so the VIX is a tough one to play because I think a lot of people for a long time now have been expecting a lot of volatility, but it's actually been fairly low volatility for at least a lot of 2023. So I do think you're going to see a strong VIX move, but it could still be several months away. So I don't really play the VIX myself, but I know a lot of people do play the VIX quite frequently. Someone says they're confused about a Fed pivot. If the Fed starts cutting rates, people say it will be a good thing for risk assets, but people also say they'll only be cutting if we start entering a recession. So what effect will rate cuts really have on risk assets? Well, I think in the short term, it's usually not good news, but in the long term, it is usually good news, right? So, I mean, I guess it depends on what your time frame is. Silver, do you see it going down in a recession? I mean, it could potentially go down in a recession, but I think that silver and gold are good plays for the next 5 years. So I don't really know in the short term what they're going to do. I did mention a few weeks ago when silver was knocking on the door of 24 that it was somewhat of an overcrowded trade. So if you want to get some, maybe wait for it to sell off and then do it. You can see it sold off. Now it's sort of back at this level. I think it's eventually going to break through, whether it does it now or whether it does it a few months from now. I don't really know. But I don't think it's the worst idea to have a position in gold and silver. What analysis do you prefer prior to buying treasuries? I mean, I don't. I think if you want to go buy treasuries, you're sort of wanting to sort of protect yourself, right? So I mean, if you think the economy is not looking so great, then I think treasuries are fine. As a student in law school, what regulation would you like to see in the industry? I don't really know that there's anything necessarily I'd like to see. I think that you're going to see a lot of altcoins be declared securities. I think you're going to see a lot more stringent requirements by exchanges in the future, and you might even see staking as a service taken away, that sort of stuff. I also think you're likely going to see any new projects are probably going to have to register with the SEC as security. So it could lead to sort of some stifled innovation for a little bit, but eventually the cryptoverse should be stronger for it. Only get one chart for the rest of crypto. Equity, commodity, investing life. What are you picking? Can't pick risk metrics. Well, for crypto, I think I would probably just pick, if I can't pick a risk metric, I'd probably just go with this chart. Because I mean, this chart really shows you sort of the ebb and flow, if it loads, of the crypto market. And so this is probably the chart I would go with. Can we have a dedicated time to talk about equities, seeing as how much we should make it a bigger chunk of our portfolio moving forward? Um, yeah, maybe we'll talk more about equities. I mean, I have thought about some of these videos do get somewhat redundant, so maybe just one of the videos each week can only be about equities. I'm not really sure how people would take that, though. Um, are you getting into any other asset classes right now, or just stacking cash, CDs, and bonds? I mean, I have picked up some index funds here and there, right? I mean, like in the stock market because who really knows what's going to happen, but for the most part, I've been primarily focused on having a strong cash position, just in just sort of some protection in case the market crumbles. Someone says, "Hey, when will Bitcoin correct? I've been stacking mostly cash, but Bitcoin just keeps getting more expensive. Do you think we'll have a correction? I do think we'll have a correction at some point, but I mean, this is another reason why you should the strategy is Bitcoin heavy and cash heavy, right? No altcoins, but just Bitcoin heavy crypto portfolio and cash heavy. Have both. That way, you get to ride Bitcoin up at the expense of altcoins getting devalued on their Bitcoin pairs. And if Bitcoin comes back down, you still have cash. I mean, this way you're hedged either way, because I don't really think the altcoin market is going anywhere unless Bitcoin goes there first. So I mean, in general, it's just Bitcoin heavy, cash heavy. I don't really have any other recommendations other than that. Do I still think Ethereum can go to the general target for final capitulation 4 to 600, or is that window past? I don't think it's past. Okay, I mean, I know that's a controversial opinion, especially this late in the game. Um, I think it could still happen. Okay, I do think it could still happen. I'm counting on it to happen. I'd like to see it happen so that I can pick up some ETH. Yeah, I mean, could I be wrong? Could be wrong. It's happened more than a few times, but yeah, I don't think Ethereum is done spending time in some of these lower ranges down here. So I still think it could go down. Um, I do think we'll eventually make it back into the lower regression band before we go on a new sustained bull market. With total 2 and total 3 coming up on long-term resistance, mid-long-term resistance, could this suggest a potential Bitcoin pullback? Um, it's possible. So if you go look at total 2, what they're referring to is or sorry, this is total 1. So if you look at total 2, it's sort of at this resistance level right now. So I mean, if it wants to break back down, it's probably going to need to do so, probably before the middle part of April. Because if it keeps going sideways at these levels, it'll just be breaking out. So I think it's probably going to roll over and come back down this way, is my guess. Same thing with total 3. Note that Bitcoin's not really at a resistance level in the same way these are, so that if Bitcoin corrects, it could potentially correct back to sort of where it broke out from. But the altcoin market has not broken out. So that's why altcoins get hammered so much more than Bitcoin. Why local top for Nvidia and Tesla? Like it's just a guess for Nvidia. I don't really know. I mean, I said I think that we topped on Wednesday, March 23rd. That's my guess. But it's moving back up and it's pretty close to sort of taking that top out. So I admit it could go higher, but I just think this move is overextended. I think it's getting somewhat irrational. What's the difference between Ethereum's Bitcoin price and the Ethereum market cap ratio? The reason they're different is because the you might look at the price and think that the like people talk about Ethereum flipping Bitcoin, right? I don't really think it's going to happen, but people talk about it. But because the supply is constantly changing, it's not about the price ratios, it's about the market cap ratios. So I think the market cap ratio is more important than the price ratio. If you look at Ethereum Bitcoin, or sorry, let me look at the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio. You can see that we didn't even go up to sort of where we were in February of 2018, right, when it went to 0.12. But if you look at the Ethereum Bitcoin market cap, we got a lot closer. We still didn't make it there, but I would argue that this is probably a better way to look at it because it actually accounts for the supply. The price ratios don't account for supply. Yeah, I think fixed income investing is still okay. Someone asked about CD. Our CD is good. How much of the cash that you hold do you plan to invest in the next 6 months? So I'm not at 70%. I'm at 60% cash. I wouldn't mind being at 70%, but with recent moves to the upside in risk assets, I'm still at 60% cash. I think I'll probably be 40% cash maybe by the end of the year. We understand the expectations in different scenarios. Do you have defined invalidations for each? Are there decisive invalidations for the altcoin reckoning, recession, Ethereum, Bitcoin, lower low? So, I mean, with the altcoin reckoning, I don't really know what people are looking for an invalidation there. I mean, I would argue that most altcoins have been getting wrecked on their Bitcoin pairs for over a year. So, it would seem weird to say that it's invalidated because, even if the lows are in for alt Bitcoin pairs, which I don't think they are, it's not like they still didn't get wrecked, right? It's not like we can say, oh, just kidding, altcoins didn't get wrecked against Bitcoin when we know they've been in the process of getting wrecked for over a year now. So I don't really think that one is a fair one to look at. Yet the Ethereum Bitcoin, it's a good question. I don't really know if I have a great answer to it, to be completely honest. I mean, I think that you're likely going to come back down, like I have drawn on here. I suppose that if we come back up and start holding this trend line as support again, then it might be time to throw in the towel. But I at this point, at this phase, I think that it's still more likely to go down. What are my thoughts on the upcoming Litecoin halving? I think Litecoin will probably sell off into it. It usually sells off a few months beforehand, so I think the relative strength of Litecoin with respect to the altcoin market is not going to last too much longer. It could last until June, but I don't think it'll last too much longer than that. Yeah, so someone else is asking me for where BNB Bitcoin's going to go. I think you're likely going to see. I mean, a few months ago I said I thought it was going to sell off at least 50%. It's already almost 50% down. I think it could go 60-70% down from its all-time high easily. Um, when are the pitchforks coming out? No, they already are. They've already been out. Anytime the altcoins pump, the pitchforks come out, but that's okay. I mean, the I think people should also just be aware that a lot of altcoins continue to bleed on their Bitcoin pairs, and it's a brutal process. It's a slow process. It's a process in which many will claim that their altcoins are holding up well, but in reality, a lot of these altcoins just sort of slowly continue to bleed and bleed and bleed. And then at some point, you wake up one day and you realize your altcoin's down 90% against Bitcoin, and that's an issue. So yeah, I mean the altcoins can rally sometimes, but I think the only reason they're going to go up right now in their USD pairs is if Bitcoin drags them up. If we drop to 17K in Q2, do you still think we would get another scare later this year? That's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, if we go back down to 17K in Q2, that could be it. But I think it might take until Q3. I'm not really sure if, I mean, yes, I mean, Bitcoin could sell off that quickly, but the slower moves are probably more likely than a really quick move. Can I look at XRP? Yeah, so we can quickly look at XRP. Let me actually look at it. I think I already have a chart for it right here. So it had a very similar move in 2019. I kind of think it's just playing out the same way. I mean, it could continue to go up a little bit, but I think that, you know, whether it's already topped or whether maybe it goes up just a little bit more, I think it's likely going to come back in the back half of this year, early next year. When do you give up on ETH Bitcoin? I do find it like to me it's really confusing sometimes, like listening to questions about Ethereum Bitcoin, because, you know, like the valuation that I took the trade that I highlighted was at 0.0749. So I just feel like, you know, when I look at this chart, when I took the trade, that initial trade, it was at 0.0749, which is right here, right, like right there. Okay. And I took it here. And we've spent a very small amount of time above that level, but a lot of people act like it was a bad trade. Like, it's not. Like, I mean, you know, yes, we've had a pump back up, but I still sold a lot right there before it collapsed. And then it came back up, and then it's just been slowly going back down and putting in lower highs. So I don't really think it's worthwhile to say that, you know, when do you give up on it, when for the most part it spent most of its time below the primary valuation that I sold it for. And when I said this is the time to sort of offload some Ethereum back to Bitcoin if you want to try to sort of double up on your Ether stack. So I don't really think it's a fair statement. I mean, you know, imagine if I had taken the trade the other way. Imagine if I had converted my Bitcoin to ETH at 0.0749. Then I imagine people would, the pitchforks would also be out, simply because we're at 0.0635. So I feel like there's this sort of jaded way to look at the market. So it's like no matter what direction it goes, there's always going to be some people that are going to act like it's not going the direction you want. When in reality, I took the trade at 0.0749, the primary trade that we highlighted over, you know, about a year ago, about 10 months ago at 0.0749. It's at 0.0636 right now. And it's not gone in a bad direction. It has gone in the right direction, and I constantly remind myself, you know, if I had taken the trade the other way, there'd be, you know, just as many people equally pissed, because they'd say, well, they converted their Bitcoin to ETH, and now Ethereum's all the way down here at 0.0635. So I don't really see this as a way that I could have ever won anything. You know, it's like, you know, basically what's happened is the Ethereum bulls are pissed off because I'm not bullish on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. And the Ethereum bears are upset that it's taking so long for it to come back down. But in reality, you know, if I had taken the trade the other way, I would have been worse off than I am, because I took the trade going from going from Ethereum to Bitcoin at this point in time was much better than going from Bitcoin to ETH. So this is one of those times where I don't really know the right answer. I mean, like, to me, it seems like it's a good trade, but a lot of people kind of pretend like it's not, even though it kind of seems like it is, right? Like, it's still below the valuation, and it has spent a few weeks above, but for the most part, it is worked out. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the content.